Hey everyone, it's Dora from flippinghousesanpancakes.com, and today we're going to cook for Shabbos again. Now I'm going to make 3 recipes today, and I'm actually going to do them a little out of order because I want to save as much time as possible while I'm cooking. I do this a lot, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I'm going to start with 2 pounds of pepper steak meat in here. We're going to make a beef and broccoli lo mein dish today. I've got my pepper steak in my Ziploc bag because I'm going to marinate it. I'm going to add 3 cloves of garlic that I've already minced right here. 3 cloves of garlic. We're going to add a 1/3 cup of soy sauce to my bag again. And actually, hold on a second. Let's grab some spray. We're going to use some cooking spray in my measuring cup. This is going to help the honey fall back out and I won't have to scrape it out. We're going to do a 1/3 cup of honey also straight into my Ziploc bag here, and that cooking spray just lets the honey just fall right off of that measuring cup. I don't have to scrape it out. I'm going to zip this up together and we're going to kind of knead it up, get this marinade all nice and set. This meat is going to go in the fridge for half an hour while I do some of my other food prep. We're going to squish it all up, toss it all together. I like to do it in a Ziploc bag instead of a bowl because it's just easier for me to turn. So every 10 minutes or so, I'm going to go into my refrigerator, flip my bag over, and just make sure, it helps make sure that all my meat really gets coated in that marinade and absorbs all the flavor. I'm going to put this in the fridge and then we're going to move on to the next dish. All right, the beef from my beef lo mein is currently marinating in the fridge, and while it's doing that, I'm going to take the opportunity to make my second dish. So today I'm going to make some homemade hummus. It's really simple. I'm going to make a basic one today, a little garlicky, but still a basic one. But if you want a really good hummus dish, you should check out my cookbook where I have roasted corn and red pepper hummus, and it is delicious. I'm not making that one today. Today, I don't have time. I'm making a super simple one. So, not that the other one's hard. The other one's not that hard. But I'm making an even easier one today. And I'm actually going to start with some pre-prepared tahina. I have this seasoned tahini. It's got like the thick part and it's got an oily part. I'm going to put some of each of those in there, about a 1/4 cup all together, just a little bit because I don't feel like hand mixing it, so we're going to let my food processor do all the work today. So I'm going to start with that and a 1/4 cup of water, and I'm going to actually get that tahina a little nice and thick before we move on to adding the other dishes. We're just going to spin it around, make it a little nice and creamy, and that's what's going to help our hummus become that really nice texture that we want. All right, this looks about ready. I'm going to open it up. Okay, my tahina has gotten kind of creamy. I'll show it to you real quick. There's my tahina. It's nice and creamy in the bottom of my food processor here. And I'm going to add the other ingredients. I'm going to add a can of garbanzo beans or chickpeas, whichever one you want to call them. It's the same thing. Those are 2 different names for the same bean. I had a can of this. I drained it and rinsed it. You want to get all that liquid off. I drained it and rinsed it and then drained it again. I add that to here. I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of oil. Now a lot of people use olive oil. I'm actually using avocado oil. I don't really enjoy olive oil. I know that's really terrible to say. I'm not a huge fan of the flavor of olive oil. So I like to just use canola oil or avocado oil in my hummus, and if you want to use olive oil, go ahead and do that. That's more classic, really. I just don't really like it so much. So I'm going to put that in. I'm going to add a little bit of, actually let's do the spices first. We don't want to make our measuring spoon wet yet. I'm gonna add some garlic powder. I'm gonna add about a tablespoon because I like my hummus garlicky. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna add a tablespoon of cumin. And that is gonna give it that kind of Mediterranean vibe that you're looking for when you eat your hummus. All right, so we've got, just put the lids back on my spices while I'm at it. Okay, the other thing I'm gonna add is 1.5 teaspoons of salt, which is half a tablespoon. 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon. So here we have half a tablespoon of salt. And I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I'm going to pour it in. So we have our tahina, our water, our chickpeas, salt, garlic powder, cumin, lemon juice, and some oil. Those are all the ingredients we need to make a delicious hummus. I'm going to close it up and we're going to blend it. Now, as this runs, if you need to add more oil to give it that creaminess, you can go ahead and add it. But always let it run first and see if that's enough. Usually 1/4 cup is about enough. So let's take a look and see how we're doing. Oh yeah, actually I'm gonna use my scraper spatula over here to scrape down the sides because some of my spices went up on the edge. But this is delicious looking. I'll bring it over and show you. And it took me what? 5 minutes, 3 minutes to make my own hummus. Look at that. Look at this hummus. How delicious is that? You don't need to buy hummus. This is cheaper. This is more delicious and fresh and homemade. So definitely make your own hummus and get my cookbook so you can make the roasted corn and red pepper hummus because you won't find that in the store and it is delicious. Now that I made my hummus, I'm going to package it up, put it in my fridge, and we're going to move on to cooking something else. Okay, my hummus is in the fridge, it's ready, and my meat is still marinating for that lo mein. So what I'm doing is I'm getting ready to make a vanilla loaf cake. But before I do that, started some linguine to cook on the stove. That's for the lo mein. Sometimes I buy lo mein noodles that are like frozen or refrigerated, those like real lo mein noodles, but in a pinch you can always use spaghetti or linguine or fettuccine or whatever you have in the house. I also, just so you know what's happening in my kitchen, I also do have my chicken soup boiling, and it's been boiling for several hours already because I cook it for at least 6 hours whenever I make a big pot of chicken soup. So that's been going for a while. I've got a tomato and garlic confit in the oven that's been roasting, and my bottom oven is preheated for my vanilla loaf cake. So, which by the way, if you need the recipe, it is on my blog. It says vanilla loaf cake. You can find it. It's nice, it's simple and easy, and it's delicious. So let's go ahead and put that together. I'm gonna start by putting four eggs into my handy KitchenAid mixer over here. You got the 4 eggs. I'm gonna put 1.5 cups of regular granulated sugar. We'll do 1.5 cups. All right. Then we're going to put a tablespoon of vanilla. A nice tablespoon of vanilla. And I moved my oil. We're going to put some oil too. We're going to put a cup of oil in here. And I'm going to actually use I'm going to use a 1/2 cup measuring cup for my oil because I want my liquids to be separate from my dry ingredients because I still have to spoon out my flour later. So let's see, that's a cup of oil. I'm gonna put this together and start to cream it. And I just like to, when I'm cooking, I think first before I start, which dishes do I have to make? How long will it take them to cook? And which utensils and bowls do I need for them? So for example, I knew I needed to marinate my meat, so I did that first, put it in the fridge, then I can do more stuff and then go back to finishing the beef lo mein. I also take the opportunity to make the noodles while that's marinating, and that just saves me time while I'm cooking. So right now, this is creamed together, and we're going to add some more ingredients. First, I'm going to add one more liquid ingredient. I'm going to add a cup of Sprite. My My kids are waiting because they know that when I've used the cup that I need, they get to finish the rest of the Sprite for Shabbos. So they were very excited to see it on the table. All right, so we've got a cup of Sprite. It's gonna give a slight, you won't even notice the citrusy taste, but it helps it kind of become more fluffy. It's good. It's very good. You should definitely try this recipe. We don't have much more that we have to add. We have to add 2 cups of flour. We'll add 2 cups of flour. Now, this flour is pre-sifted. I mostly shake it to make sure that the flour is nice and loose because you don't want heavily compacted flour. So I give it a nice shake. I've got 2 cups of flour there. Okay, I'm gonna put a half a teaspoon of salt, which I moved also. That's what happens when I clean up from one recipe. Sometimes I move stuff around and forget that I need it for the next recipe. So here we go. Half a teaspoon of salt, okay, and a teaspoon of baking powder. Put that in there. There's the lid. That is all the ingredients we need for the main part of the cake. I'm gonna let it mix together. We're gonna put it into my prepared baking pan over here. I have a loaf pan that I've already sprayed with cooking spray that's ready to go in the oven. We're gonna mix this up, pour it in, and then when the cake is finished and all cooled, we will put a little glaze over the top. All right, my cake looks ready. I like to always get all the batter, so I scrape that up. Now we're gonna scrape this down. I don't use a spoon or anything. I use, yes, again, scraper spatula. If you know what I'm talking about, if you've seen any of my posts, I talked a little bit about types of spatulas. So I've got my scraper spatula, and I'm gonna use the scraper to get every last bit of this nice cake batter into my pan. This is gonna be an awesome loaf cake for Shabbos, and again, super easy. Take me only a few minutes to put it together. The rest is all done by the oven. So I'm gonna go ahead, put this in the oven, and then we should be about ready to get started on the lo mein. Okay, the time has come to make our beef and broccoli lo mein. So I'm gonna get it started. I've got this pot, it's nice and warm. We're gonna start by putting 2 tablespoons of oil. I wouldn't probably use olive oil. Today I'm using avocado oil because that's what I've got in the kitchen, but canola oil or vegetable oil, any very light flavored oil, safflower oil, any of those would be a good choice, okay? Especially one that can handle the high heat of a stir-fry pan, so that's why the avocado oil is a perfect choice. I am going to start by adding all of my beef plus the marinade that's in the bag into this pan, and we're gonna get the meat all nice and cooked up. But we want that liquid too. Hear it cooking? It's gonna be good. This is going to be very tasty. We're gonna let it cook up. I'm gonna stir it up a little bit. I want the meat to be all completely cooked, but I also don't want to lose too much of the liquid. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cover it. And maybe not everybody would like to do that, but I like to do it because I really like to make sure my meat is nice and fully cooked. So we're gonna let it cook for a few minutes, and then we're gonna add some more ingredients. Okay, so the beef is nice and cooked, if you can tell. We're gonna add some more ingredients. We're gonna add some carrots that I've sliced, some onion, and some scallion. We're gonna get those in the frying pan. I do like to have veggies in my lo mein. We'll put those in, and I also have a bag of frozen broccoli, 24 ounces. It's not so frozen anymore. I did take it out earlier when I made the marinade so it could sit on the counter and become a little less frozen, which makes it a little faster to cook. So I'm going to toss those all together. Oh, it's going to be so pretty. Can you see how pretty that is? I'm going to lean the camera in a minute so you can see. Now here is the really biggest challenge for me. I need a bigger wok. That's my biggest challenge. These veggies are going to cook down a little bit and it's going to fit better in my pan. But I really definitely, that's something I got to work on. I'm going to cover it again just because it will help steam the vegetables. Obviously they're also frying a little bit, but it'll help steam the vegetables and it will make it cook a little faster. But I think I definitely need a bigger wok because in addition to all those veggies and all the meat, I have my 2 pounds of linguine here that has to go in. So I don't know how I'm gonna do that. Might have to mix this all up in a bowl, but I would really like to cook it all in this stir-fry pan all together. So it could be, if you don't have a very big frying pan, you can either do this in sections where you're going to take the meat and the broccoli out, put the lo mein in, kind of cook it up a little bit, and then combine it all together later, or have your recipe so you have only 1 pound of each item, like 1 pound of noodles or 1 pound of beef. Of course, I have a big family, so we need to have a decent amount of that food, especially since it's our main dish for Shabbos. So we're going to let that cook, and I'll add the spaghetti in a little bit and show you how it comes out. Alright, so here's the beef with the broccoli and the carrots and the onion and scallion, and it's all cooking up nicely. It's almost ready to be moved, and I'm going to simply have to move it because my pan is not big enough to hold everything. So in a few minutes, I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to take everything except for the liquid, put it in a bowl or another pan, and then I'm going to add my spaghetti in here, cook it a little bit in with all this nice liquid. Then we'll combine the whole thing. Okay, and this is why I moved all the broccoli and other veggies and all the beef from the pan, to just give this a little toss in the liquid, because I literally can't fit anything else. I do really need to get a bigger wok here. But in the meantime, this is going to work perfectly. I'm going to toss this for a minute or two in here. I'm going to transfer the whole thing into the pan with the other beef ingredients. Okay, so I transferred the pasta and the broccoli and beef all into this big pan. And no, we're not going to eat this whole thing on Shabbos, of course, but we'll have leftovers for Sunday night as well. And I'm just tossing it all together. It happens to be it's going to get a little warmed up again, obviously, before we eat it. And so that will make it a little crispier and a little softer all at the same time. And a perfect lo mein. So check that out. How delicious does that look? All right, hummus is done. The lo mein is done. Now the last thing I need to do is to glaze my vanilla loaf cake. I'm gonna make a super simple glaze. It's just going to be 1.5 cups of confectioner's sugar. We're gonna add 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And then the next part is the really important part, and that's called being careful when you add the water, because confectioner's sugar always is a little interesting, and if you put too much, it'll get really thin. And if you put too little, it will stay too thick. Okay, so the trick is to not put too much water and not put too little. I always do a little bit and then I add more, because it can go really quickly from being just a touch too little and too thick to being suddenly super watery. So I always add a little bit at a time and mix it up until it can't mix anymore, and then I add more. Confectioner's sugar is a little tricky that way. Well, we'll get it just to be the right glaze. We want it to stay on top of our cake, but still to kind of coat the cake. So I'm just going to go from thick to thin really fast. So that's the tricky part. Right now, let's see. Still too thick. We'll add a little more water. It's still maybe not all of it. Oh yeah, that is going to be amazing. Look at that. Pores. Still actually have some water in here, so we didn't use all the water. We're going to go ahead and pour this over my cake, right over the middle, and then we'll spread it out. Woo, trying to escape. Look at that. This gorgeous vanilla icing, the glaze on top of the cake. Some of it might drip down over the side, which is all good. When it's glazed, never good, right? Glaze is always delicious. we go. Could have even maybe made it a little thinner, but I think that came out delicious. So we've got our glazed vanilla loaf cake, and it poured over one side a lot more than the other, but it looks really good. And that's what I made for Shabbos today. We made the hummus, we made the beef lo mein, and we made a vanilla loaf cake. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell for notifications so you find out every time I upload a new video. And of course, check out my website, flippinghouseandpancakes.com, where, by the way, you can find this vanilla loaf cake recipe right there.